Hello, and welcome to this FairSale Hot Topics webinar, where today we're going to look into the subject of how fast-growing tech businesses are turning HR into a strategic pillar. My name is Paul Burrin. I'm the CMO at FairSale, and I'm joined today by Jack Hirschman, who is a staff writer at Hot Topics. So welcome, Jack. Good to have you with us.
Hi, Paul. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Not at all. So look, Jack, we've had a chance to work together a little bit, and I'm really very interested, and I'm sure that people listening in will be very interested to Hot Topics and how you actually go on about being able to talk to some of these really interesting HR leaders in this Tech 100 2016 list that Hot Topics created. So clearly great privilege for you to be able to talk to some of these leaders of some of these great new brands about how they are managing and engaging people in the digital economy. So tell us a little bit more about it. I mean, how did this whole thing get going, and how come you've been in such an amazing position to have these conversations?
Absolutely. I think first off, I will say it has been a true privilege to be able to interview and speak to some of these amazing people. But I think before I dive in, I'll probably explain a little bit about Hot Topics, just to contextualize why we went about it in the first place. So essentially, we are a contributor-led digital media business, and we are providing a platform for the world's business leaders to learn and share each other's thought leadership. And basically, our contributors are from every sector imaginable, and many of our contributors actually make up the management teams of some of the world's fastest-growing companies. And so, in December of last year, we were sitting around and looking at the HR industry and realized that really it was an industry that hadn't been covered anywhere near enough. That has become, as the title of this webinar suggested, a hugely strategic part of organizations. So we, through a hell of a lot of desk research as well as some nominations from our community, put together this Tech HR 100. And this list features the leading HR professionals working within high-growth tech companies worldwide. So, by high growth, I mean, this could be a Shazam or a WeWork or Uber competitors, Lyft, or even Pinterest. And, either way, these are some great brands on this list. And I think actually, these companies provided a really great backdrop for the HR industry as a whole, because, some of these companies are growing really, really fast. If I could just give a quick example, I mean, Sue Hong, who's the WeWork HR director, for example, she's grown the company from 250 to 1,200 in the space of a year, which is pretty amazing. And, managing that kind of growth is an incredibly difficult task. So to really tap in to the way that they were managing that growth, and I guess the HR in a wider context was really what we were trying to look at.
So that's a great starting point, and obviously, it's going to be really fascinating to be able to share just some of the learnings that came out of some of the conversations that you had. And I noticed that one of the things that seems to have come to the front probably fairly quickly in all of this is really around the whole notion of sort of brand experience, which, when you're thinking about this from an HR point of view, at first sight seems a little bit odd, because, I mean, isn't brand experience something that marketing and marketers would deal with rather than perhaps HR or chief people officers?
Absolutely, no, you're completely right, and this is kind of something that was brought to the fore as the series progressed a little bit. I mean, first off, the desire to actually be involved and for these HR directors to actually want to be interviewed was quite amazing. We kind of called it the symptom of never being kissed before. Everyone really wanted to get involved, and that was great. And initially, we kind of started out with, the view that HR was really being powered by data and analytics, which of course it is. But this idea of the employment brand really came sort of slightly later. And the kind of consistent thing that we found was essentially that an employment brand really is about creating a consistent brand and evangelizing your company's mantra across every single touch point. This is basically from the moment an individual first interacts with the HR department, be that discovering a little bit more about what a career would look like with them, etc. And interestingly, this is actually quite a new phenomenon, the idea of an employment brand. It mostly comes down to the fact that companies for years and years have basically had a pretty maniacal focus on understanding the customer mindset, and doing so to such a degree that they're using data to shape all the products and the things that they were doing. And this, to some extent, left them with tunnel vision a little bit. And a lot of the HR directors basically said that taking this approach essentially left a lot of employees out by the wayside a little bit. So, if we look at some of the quotes on the screen, I mean, one, particularly in my conversation with Peter Navin, who's the Chief Human Resources and this was kind of an attempt to shift his focus back to employees. I think that's quite a nice sentiment, which I'm sure you'll agree with.
No, it's marvelous, isn't it? I mean, to actually be thinking of getting that blend almost between HR and marketing. So that's really cool. But then, what other things were you finding from some of the other people leaders that you had a chance to talk with?
This is really, I guess, around creating. And this I mean, it's something that came out a lot on over and also had the great fortune of being able to speak to their CMO as well, and obviously the two work very closely together. But their notion is, and you'll see that a lot of their marketing collateral is basically the concept of belonging anywhere. And not only did Mark Levy want this to be made apparent within the marketing collateral, but also he wanted it to be reflected in the offices of Airbnb as well. I mean, of course, if you think about it, this is a really difficult task to do because the majority of the individuals who work for Airbnb, who are the hosts, the people who actually rent properties off, technically they'll never set foot into the offices of Airbnb, which is quite an odd sort of sentiment. And I guess it's kind of the same really with Uber as well. And it begs the question of how do you make people feel at home or belong anywhere when they aren't actually going to set foot in there. So basically, what he did was he built this enormous Airbnb headquarters. If you just give it a quick Google, you'll be able to take a look, and it's a really beautiful offices over in San Francisco. And he actually so it's little things like that that really help bring an employment brand to life.
So this is really interesting because we're talking obviously about employment brand. We're talking now about employee experience or the workforce experience. And the notion also came out of this as I read some of the commentary that you wrote about this whole notion of workforce experience journey. So maybe you'd like to, start a little bit in terms of, how does this relate to what we typically know from a marketing point of view of the customer journey and the customer experience through that journey. So going through a buying process is a good example. And there's a whole series of different stages that people go through when you're looking to purchase something. So, typically you have to start to become at a point where you're becoming aware that you either are interested in something or you have a need for something, and you start doing some research about it. And as you build up more knowledge and a better picture of what that is and the sort of different types of products that might be out there and, the different types of brands and that sort of thing, you then start to move into the sort of next phase, which is really about consideration. How do you start to consider, well, of all the various products that might be available to you, which are the ones that perhaps are best suited to you? It could be in terms of the types of product that you're using. It could be pricing related. It could be availability oriented. Use it. And then depending on how this whole process has gone and how you feel about it, you might be inclined to buy something else from that particular company or brand, or you might not. And depending on the overall experiences that you've enjoyed, potentially you could become, loyal to the brand and ultimately to become a brand and want them to have a similar experience. So what's interesting about this whole idea then for a brand, either as a full-time employee or in some other capacity, and you're going to start doing some research. You'll either know the brand and think, yeah, I'd really like to work for them, heard of them, but nevertheless the job sounds interesting. So anyway, you're going to do some sort of awareness, you're going to do some research. If you're interested, you're likely to put in some sort of application and you become a candidate on this whole journey. And this then starts to build in the sort of the notion of a candidate experience. And as you go through the process, if you're successful, then hopefully you'll get an offer. And if you decide role and responsibilities, your objectives, being able to contribute more fully to what the company's doing so that you can really add value. And as that continues, you want to be able to manage and grow, whether that's management in the context of what you do and manage that to the best of your abilities, but probably more likely to want to manage teams and projects and people and be. And there's this whole, leaving the business and then moving on. And at some point, if all of that's being great, then you will potentially become an advocate for that company. Was it a good place to work? People. And if it wasn't a good set of experiences, and you don't have, good feelings about the business, and you don't have good memories, then it's probably less likely to be the case. But the whole point is, we're building out this whole notion of this internal journey, and it's something which is really interesting, because as we start to look at this from an HR point of view, not only is it crucial to understand workforce experience across the whole journey, not just whether it's a great place to work in terms of a nice workplace environment, but actually looking at different processes and the way that the whole company operates, and then looking at it from a people point of view with a view to making significant improvements. So that's essentially what we're talking about here, and I think that it's perceived in the marketplace from a brand point of view of being a great place to work, because if all of those come together, you're incrementally adding value across the business, whilst at the same time delivering these great experiences. So it's something which is,
He should go out of his way to make efforts in improving the happiness and productivity of his employees. If it didn't mean, if there wasn't tangible business value linked back to that, which I found interesting. And he kind of mentioned how he sees himself seeing data as an enabler, as something that can be built upon, is key. Talent acquisition, especially with Shazam, Ruthie Penn, so facet of someone's behaviour doesn't quite make sense when the environment they're going to be in is actually would actually require a different.
Because it speaks to a number of things about the importance of getting.
They really it was almost like a warning, just to remind HR leaders or whoever would be reading the articles to actually remember that.
Outstanding leaders, and it's really been great to have you
to speak with them. But yes, no, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Well, and a big thank you